Yeah, that's how we broadcast. All right. So we are live. Last day E3. We're doing another live show, and if you haven't been able to check it out, we've had some pretty interesting days, haven't we, Cassidy?
It's been a really cool E3 actually. I've been kind of excited with a lot of stuff that's happened.
So we've been trying this new roundtable thing. We probably should introduce ourselves, especially if you have no idea what's going on. I'm Andrew Whipple. I'll be your host today, and we've got a couple of special guests, of course. Cassidy is joining us once again,
That's me.
and the glamorous, glorious, shining knight. I suppose is that too much? Probably, but
Probably a little.
Mr. Chris Park of Arcen Games is joining us.
Hey, good to be here.
So we've delved pretty deeply into all the going-ons of the conferences, Microsoft, EA, Ubisoft, Sony, of course, and a bunch of the games as well. We've talked about all assortments of things, but today we really wanted to focus on a different conversation. We wanted to talk about indie studios. We wanted to talk about how maybe all these different announcements really affect the industry as a whole, and probably I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of the news that came from it as well. So, where'd you guys like to start? Chris, you know what? Why don't we start with you? What have you seen? As a developer, you obviously have things to do. You have a family. You don't have a whole lot of time, and you don't really follow E3 that much.
Nope, I don't. I mean, I have in some. Well, I didn't really even before the before becoming a developer myself. I mean, I always liked reading the roundups about new games that I was particularly interested in. But I suppose my style has always been, if you go to a conference and you sit down and you're listening to a presentation, or you're streaming it online, you kind of have to follow their agenda. If they want to ramble on about something for 10 or 15 minutes that you have no interest in, you're going to sit there for 10 or 15 minutes while they ramble on. Or if they're not rambling on, but they're just talking about lots of things that lots of people are super excited about, but you're not, then again, you're sitting there and you're, interested on some level, but it's not the same as being able to really focus in on what you want to. And given how E3 is just this massive thing that sucks up the whole time of journalists and so on for days, good portion of a week there, um, it makes it so that it's really a fire hose of information if you're not a journalist. I mean, even if you are, but especially if you're not. And so for myself, I kind of like to say, all right, well, what are the things that scroll through real quick? What are the games that sound interesting? Ooh, new Mario game. Let's look at that. Ooh, that sounds like an interesting shooter. Hey, that's a sequel to something I liked.
Right.
Give me the paragraph spiel about it, and come back to me when it's out and there's some reviews coming. you know. Um,
Well, most people do get excited just from the announcements, even if it is just a short teaser.
Yeah, and I used to do that too. I would get excited about this and that that's coming, but I guess, I was thinking about before this how to really explain why I don't, and I guess there's two kind of main points. One is I'm getting old, so I mean, I'm not that old, but once you start getting into your, I'm 30 going on 31. That's not that old really, but it's really different from when you're like 15. And I remember as a teenager, everything was exciting, and it's like, holy cow, this is going to be like the best thing ever coming up. And sometimes it was, but a lot of times it wasn't. And so you just get progressively more, I guess, kind of jaded as you get into your 20s and then 30s. And it's just like, yeah, marketing, PR hype, let me know when I can play it. And, let me know when there's some opinions from some people I trust, whether that's specific reviewers or the people I know or whatever. But, there's been there's just been so many games that were just extolled as like the next awesome giant thing. This is going to be just like this other game you loved, except even better. And this one is like nothing you've ever seen. Well, and there's all this sort of stuff, and like everybody's super excited about everything. And after you keep going around that block and you keep kind of getting, how do I put this? Well, kicked in the privates, I guess, time after time with this, like, this sounds so awesome. Oh, that's not at all it. Then it's like, all right, I'm going to stand over here so I don't get kicked. And when you're ready to actually show me something I can look at for real, then I'll approach a little closer with caution, And so it's not like I'm not excited about games. I'm just excited about, there's no reason to have like preemptive excitement, I guess, is really what it boils down to.
So it's really interesting that you say this, because I was going through my Twitter feed this morning, just kind of checking out headlines, and one of the biggest announcements that came out of Sony's conference was the fact that Kingdom Hearts 3 exists and is a real thing. I don't know if you saw this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they had a teaser trailer for it, and at the end of the teaser trailer, it just said now in development. It didn't say coming soon. It didn't say coming in 2015 or whatever. It just said now in development. And so I found a headline this morning. I don't remember who the outlet was, but there was somebody from Square Enix who actually voiced some regret about this and said we might have shown the game a little too early. So, and I find that interesting because it does play right into what you're saying with marketing and hype, because, I mean, people lost their crap over that game. They were just going insane. And, like, because I tweeted about this too, I'm like, Kingdom Hearts. I mean, I like Kingdom Hearts. We're not going to see that game for years. It's going to turn into a Last Guardian situation where people are like, where is it? Where is it? It's kind of, do you feel like we do these things to the point where it's almost kind of hurting things? Like, do you think that people make these announcements too early on such a regular basis, or do you feel like that's becoming like a negative trend?
I think it varies. If it's 3 years out, that may be too early. People's attention can't really hold for three years, and if it's showing up at like 2-3 E3s, on the one hand, it's kind of cool that you get to see the progress. On the other hand, the pressure on that studio is just mounting more and more and more. And I don't know. The other thing is, to kind of counterbalance what I said, you do have to put out stuff in advance, to my frustration, honestly. But this is something that, as a developer, I've come to kind of learn. It's counter to the way that I look at things, but it seems to be actually kind of a necessity in the industry, which is that with A Valley Without Wind 2, for instance, and our game Shattered Haven as well, we didn't do pre-release hype or really talk about them all that much. I mean, we talked about them with our customers, existing players and so forth, and through our social media and so on, but we didn't really do the sort of press push that we did with A Valley Without Wind 1, for example. And Valley Without Wind 1 had been in development for 15 months before it came out, and we'd had like 6 articles on Rock Paper Shotgun during that time about it, and a big like 2-segment interview was part of that, and we'd had coverage upon coverage upon coverage throughout that whole period. When that game came out, it sold like crazy. And then with the other ones, we were constantly playing catch up when those came out, because there was no expectation. It was just like, we thought that, I had this idea that was like, all right, we'll make it so that it's like, boom, here's this awesome thing out of nowhere. But the thing is, the press in particular seem a lot more interested in talking about stuff that their readership can't get at yet, whether that's a hands-on demo they play at E3 that the public is not able to get to yet, or something that's in a pre-release state, or or a review for something that's just about to come out but that isn't quite out yet. There's a lot more interest in the press about talking about stuff that's coming than stuff that is here for you now. And I guess that kind of makes sense if you think about it logically, because the press doesn't really need to inform you about something you can just go try right now, because you could just go try it right now. I mean, they're just kind of acting as a filter, I guess unless it doesn't have a demo, which a lot of stuff doesn't. But yeah, so I mean, we've kind of found that thing where you have to do some pre-release hype to some extent, but how much is too much, how much is too little? There's some sort of sweet spot in there, and it's probably a fairly big range of, like, you know, maybe anywhere from 2 years in advance to, you know, half a year in advance is probably the sweet spot range. You're getting a little close on either end of that, but, you know, 3 years out, maybe not. And so anyway, that's my take on that.
Sure.
It's interesting. It really is. You're just hearing it from a developer who has gone over and over about how deep and accessible that a game needs to be, but at the same time you want to innovate. You had explained to me before your first game, right? Tadalis, it tanked.
Well, that was our second one. It was AI War was our first, yeah.
Okay. But it was financially unsuccessful. And you went from that game to something like Valley Without Wind, which was highly touted. And
we started out with AI War, which was just a massive success. And I mean, that's still our most...
Still going.
Yeah, it's crossed into 7 figures of sales too. So I mean, it's Valley 1 doesn't really compare to that, but it had a much quicker jump start. but at any rate, yeah, it really varies widely. Sorry, you had a point, and I stepped on you.
No, it's sort of where I was going though. It's interesting to me because you had all that pre-release hype for it, and you went to some shows, and you showcased it. Rock Paper Shotgun being a more highly efficient website in getting out the word on indie titles. It's great, but then you release games like your most recent releases were Shattered Haven, right? And you just did come out with another one, Skyward Collapse, I think, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like I usually follow indie games as close as I possibly can, and having relationships with you guys and playing your stuff, I was actually very surprised at Skyward Collapse. I had been busy in the last month or so, but I think that's sort of what you were talking about. Something just stealths its way somewhere, and maybe it doesn't do as well as you want. But how has that game been going for you?
It's actually our second fastest moving game ever.
Good news.
Yeah, exactly. It's Valley Without Wind 1 is not our top grossing game, but it was the fastest off the mark on first release. It was about 3 times faster than AI War, even though in the long haul AI War's trashed it. Skyward Collapse is about halfway between AI War and Valley 1, and over time Skyward Collapse looks like it's gonna be our second overall earning game behind AI War and ahead of the Valley games. And so it's that's been going well. We did actually have a fair bit of high profile press in some places prior to Skyward coming out, but that was a game that we developed in only about 2 months, and after we'd already designed it and so forth, but actual implementation. And so there's a limited amount of time for doing pre-release press when you're developing something on that short of a timetable. And AI War as well, this was 2009, so it's a different era, but well, it was, the indie revolution was really just starting, the indie movement, and I just happened to be right at the front of that in terms of timing of when my stuff came out. Like a bunch of other indies, we just kind of all happened to do it all at once. It wasn't organized or anything, just people were suddenly able to sell indie games and did. But at any rate, yeah, so I came out of kind of nowhere with AI War, and it was, really slow of a ramp up. The first 2 weeks, 0 sales, and then by the end of 3 months we'd sold like $16,000 worth of stuff, and had done well on it on Stardock's Impulse and stuff, and then we started getting a bunch of high profile reviews and so forth, and by that point, when we came out on Steam in October of that year, the game had originally come out in May, so there'd been a good about 5 months between the 1.0 and the 2.0, really, the original release and the Steam release. By that point, we'd had lots of buzz, and so when we came out on Steam, then boom, it did really well. It just, I'm always looking for patterns and so forth in this, but I think it kind of varies. The circumstances for every game is always different, so it's kind of a tricky thing to separate the signal from the noise. Whatever Bungie puts out next, they can do an early teaser trailer anytime they frickin' feel like. If it takes them 5 years to finish a game, people are still going to be just as interested. It doesn't matter. They talk about a new Final Fantasy game or a new Mario game or whatever. The audience is built in. I'll buy most any Mario game that's actually a literal platformer, not like Mario baking or something.
Please make that.
Yeah, really, that's true. But yeah, I'll buy most any Mario game because I know it's going to be good. It's going to have this certain amount of quality and a certain style and all that. So you don't have to worry about pitching me early. I say, ooh, Mario game coming, cool. It's coming out this holiday season. All right, mark that down as one I want to put on my, Christmas list. So it's just.
You're a traditionalist in that respect.
In which sense?
In picking up titles that you know and, well, you know yourself that you're going to enjoy, maybe you and your family, because you know that the formula isn't going to change up enough for you to be upset.
It's a mix. I like, a lot of the games that are... Let's how do I put this? They kind of are a little bit... I tend to pick from the best stuff of the year and then stuff that I traditionally like. Let's put it that way. So, I really... And stuff that just scratches certain itches. So, I don't care what people say about, for instance, Far Cry 2. I really enjoyed it because it, sometimes you just want to go shoot stuff. And, I hadn't had time to get into Far Cry 3, but, whatever. And then something there's a variety of other things that are kind of more experimental that come out, and I'm like, ooh, that sounds interesting, let's play that, either indie wise or occasionally AAA. And so, but it has to be something that is suitably, I guess, vetted first, because I don't really have time to go do a bunch of vetting myself, and there's so many things competing for my interest that I can afford to be kind of choosy. And since I only have so much gaming time, like everybody, you kind of have to be choosy. And that's actually almost depressing to hear myself say as a developer, because that's the last thing you want to hear is that, oh yeah, you got to have somebody vet it and you want to be, really choosy what you buy. And, it's like, oh man, this market's getting so crowded. Are you kidding me? I don't want to be going up with people with that, sort of feeling. But, fortunately, that's not the way the market feels in general.
No, I think...
If the market was like me, this would not be a good market.
Not really, no. But that's the glory of being able to dabble in this indie revolution that you're talking about. Now, indulge me, just for a second. How... Because you don't follow mainstream gaming that much, you have a grab bag of sorts at the end of the year, like you said. It's kind of, it puts you in that hypocritical situation, right? Because you want to look at the high profile games, right? The ones that you're avoiding right now, but you work in the indie business. Do you ever get a chance to really sit down and try any of the, I guess you could say, competition or similar games out there?
Oh, absolutely. Most of the games that I play actually are on the iPhone. I download about 4 iPhone games a month, I would say, and play them on average, and then play various ones. I don't play them to completion, not remotely, but just because of the time constraints of being, a parent and, really busy at work and so forth, iPhone is actually really good for me in terms of, when I have availability. I play some stuff on the PC as well, but a lot of times I want to kind of get away from the PC. There's a different thing between being In terms of being hypocritical, I mean, it depends on what part of the market you're in versus what part of the market you're selling to. And there's not a whole lot of other indie developers. It's not a universal thing. Like if you like first-person shooters in the AAA side, and it's like, well, aren't you being hypocritical that you don't play Final Fantasy? It's like, wait, what? Because indie development, it's like, well, yeah, but yeah, you've got the ones that are like really deep and time-consuming, and I like working on those, and I did like playing those before starting to work on those, but I get that kind of mental workout from making those and playing my own, so I don't necessarily feel the need to go play other people's strategy games because I'm already doing that here. And then there's the other kinds of games that are like little artsy games or whatever. I love those. They're short, they're artsy, and they're really just beautiful, like Limbo or yeah, exactly, or
Braid,
of course, and there's another one that was really good, Nihil Umbra, I guess I'm saying that right. That it's lesser known, but it's really good. They're trying to get on Steam right now. I played it on iOS, and it's really clever and really really cool. But playing stuff like that is a nice change of pace because it's like, well, this is not what I'm doing all day long, and it's just so different. And let's do that. But it's just kind of if you think about a stage magician, do you think a stage magician goes to the show of other stage magicians and sits there like the audience does to enjoy it? Probably not. They go to the show and they see how the magic tricks are being done, and if it's a good enough show or whatever, then hey, that's still entertaining because hey, that's cool, he put on a really good show and I enjoyed that. But it's not the same as like the people who want to be in the magician sense. They want to be fooled by the show. Hey, that looks like magic. Oh, I know it's some sort of trick, but hey, that looks like magic. I'm enjoying that. And when you see a mountain or something like that that's blocking your view in pick your game, that's 3D, most people, I think, kind of extrapolate there's stuff on the other side of that mountain and the world keeps going and I wish I could see over there. And I think there's skybox back there, and I can't escape that feeling of like, it doesn't detract from the game, but I don't have quite the same sense of wonder that I did as a kid. It's like, yeah, I see how those polygons are put together and ooh, that's a nice shader, they're hiding the skybox well. They've really managed to make it feel more maze-like with the constrained. You just can't stop analyzing as you're going, and you kind of know the tricks. Even though I don't do 3D games terribly much, all our stuff is 3D under the hood, but 2D and 3D. So,
it's got to be a tough feeling, though. You want to enjoy the game, and you still do, but ever since you became the person who you are, the developer, it's tough to loose that feeling, right?
Yeah, you can't really go back, and that's why I like stuff that really plays on either gameplay or story in particular. Just really pure gameplay or story, and that's one of the things that I like about, for instance, Far Cry 2. It's just you running around shooting guys with the gun. That's pretty much all it is. I don't care that the guys respawn at checkpoints. It just gives me more guys to hit with the car or shoot. I don't really care. I don't care. It doesn't, I'm not going for immersion because the immersion's already broken for me, is I guess what I'm saying. I'm unlikely to be as immersed as somebody that is coming to it not seeing the strings. So instead of going for the immersion factor, which a lot of people are, I'm there for the gameplay or the story. So something that breaks immersion is not going to bug me, but something that's making me sit through bad story or cutscenes that are uninteresting, or if the gameplay doesn't evolve properly. Boy, I could name some names, so I'm not gonna. It starts off fun, and then like 2 hours later, you're like, this is the same, and it's not really that interesting. Like Far Cry 2, it's the same the whole way through, but it's satisfying in a tactile way. So I don't care that it's the same all the way through. It's still fun. It's what Keith and I at Arcen refer to as bubble wrap popping fun, and that is awesome. It's something
bubble wrap popping fun.
Absolutely,
I like that.
Yeah.
It's not mentally taxing. It's not something that is whatever. It can be in part of any game, and it's just satisfying. We all like popping bubble wrap, and it's just like sometimes you just want to come home and shoot some people, and it's fun.
Best part of Ace Ventura.
Yeah, and it's one of those. I feel like immersion is one of those buzzwords that starts to kind of drive me crazy sometimes, because I'm right there with you. Like, there are some games that I play for story, and I love just kind of falling in there and just getting absorbed by that story and that world, But then there are other games, Infamous is one of them for me. I love Infamous. I don't care about the story of Infamous at all. Right. I just don't. I turn on podcasts, I turn on music, and I just run around in that world and just shoot things with electricity, and I just love playing it because it's so fun.
Right.
And it's, we've talked to other developers before where, in testing before they release the game, or sometimes even afterwards, they'll get complaints about, continuity or how realistic something is in a game. And it's like, at the end of the day, like, sometimes people need to just calm down, I feel like, because it's a game.
Right.
The very nature of a game is that it should be fun.
Right.
So I like your philosophy. I'm right there with you on that.
The chain link fence kryptonite is still pretty amusing, but that really comes down to a gameplay issue where it's like, I want to get up this fence, but are you kidding me? It's chain link and I can't climb it. But, it's less of an immersion thing and more of a, I want to get up there. Stop making me not get up there.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's with a really, really good story, you can kind of forget yourself. And with games that are more abstract, like pixel art games or whatever, like To the Moon, for instance, you're having to picture so much of that in your head anyway, in terms of what's really going on. I mean, you're looking at the screen, but you're kind of, with any sort of classic pixel art game, and aka a lot of indie games, you're kind of picturing more than is there. Part of what's going on in your brain is on the screen in terms of what you're seeing, and part of it is being fabricated by your brain as you play. And that works out really interestingly, because I think it's actually easier to get immersed in that in the same way that you get a richer world when you're reading a book than you do when you're looking at something on a movie or television or something. And I feel like a lot of the more abstract forms have more to do with, like pixel art, have more to do with books than they do with, say, movies, which the big AAA stuff does. And, if you want to give somebody really... Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm glad you mentioned To the Moon, because I love that game. I actually reviewed that game, and I gave it a 10. Because that game, it was just... I had no complaints about it. I'm like, this game is so emotionally just beautiful, and it's so well done, and so interesting, and it makes me care about, like, this... it looks like classic Final Fantasy games. Like, that's kind of the vibe I got from it. Just like that real pixelated, kind of retro-ish sort of look.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with that one. I think it's totally one of those things where it doesn't really matter what the game looks like, so long as you hit it with just the right approach, it could be awesome.
Or does it? Now picture To the Moon as a AAA title that looks as good as it possibly can, with full voice acting and so forth, like, I don't know, Heavy Rain sort of quality of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would lose a lot.
What did you think of Telltale's The Walking Dead?
I thought it was really good. I found it a little distressing, and so I stopped playing after the first episode. But I liked I appreciated what I played. Well,
why did you stop?
Like I said, it just thematic reasons, really. I mean, I love like Left 4 Dead or whatever, but I don't find it stressful. And I originally liked like the John Romero sort of zombie movies, but then that just kind of got to the point where it was a little overly disturbing, and some of the situations that are there in these sorts of games really bother. When you're, well, again, I'm generalizing, but for me, when I was unattached to anybody, you're single and so forth, and it didn't really matter some of the stuff they're showing with like broken families and stuff with zombies and all that. But then once you're married, and then especially once you have kids, then that kind of, you don't want to identify too much to these people that are going through what is happening in that game or that movie. And with a game or the movie that's really well done, like Walking Dead was, you identify way too closely with the people that are going through that stuff, and so that makes it just intensely unpleasant for me, But so it's a really good sign they did their job really well, because you feel like those people did, and yada yada, and there's a lot of ways that I want to feel. Well, like one of my favorite games is Silent Hill 2, and it's just kind of the nature of what your specific tastes are. Like, I'm not averse to horror, for instance, but Silent Hill 2 is disturbing in a way that I find really palatable, versus like Silent Hill 3 really bugged me for some reason. I guess because it's a girl. I don't know, that you're like, oh my god, don't hurt this girl. But I don't know. That sounds bad, but I don't mean it in a sexist way. It's just kind of it brings out your protective instincts, I guess, versus like when it's the guy. For me, I feel like I am that guy, identify with him, versus it's the girl. I'm like, it's like watching a movie where you're like, don't hurt that person, I'm supposed to protect them, but I'm not there. Instead, it's just them. Versus when it's the guy, you're like, there I am, getting my butt chewed off by a monster. Somehow that's less distressing when it's something harming you versus people you're supposed to protect.
Sure. Now I bring up The Walking Dead because I feel like if that game had been done kind of like Naughty Dog style, where it was a lot of mocap and a lot of heavy voiceover and very, photorealistic graphics, it might have lost some of its charm a little bit.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, I think that you can do different things with different presentation styles. Not just art, but also, is it voiced or is it not?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Zelda needs voice acting. People complain about that every game. It's like, it doesn't need that. You're going to lose. It's going to really change the feel of those games if they ever do that.
It's like giving Gordon Freeman a voice.
Yeah,
you identify.
Yeah,
you don't. You just don't. You don't want to. Why? Why? It's like, with the Master Chief, I think this is a good thing too. Everybody knows about Halo. No matter what kind of gamer you are, you understand what Halo is, its popularity. The Master Chief doesn't really speak that much in the games if you've gone through them. In the newest one, he speaks a bit more. And I know I've had this conversation with people, but it really is that argument. Should you give these people more of a role in the story itself about them? Or do you want the player to feel like they're the ones that inhabit that character? That's a tough spot.
I think it really varies by the game. And once you set up a precedent in a series, you pretty much need to stick to that precedent unless you're intentionally trying to reboot. So like what they did with Tomb Raider or something, they really took you out of being her and put you more in the role of kind of controlling and watching her. And that was really interesting. I felt like that was a positive move for that series. She was more of an actual character versus just your avatar with boobs, and I felt like that was and it seems like most people feel like that was a really positive move for that series. But it just kind of, I don't think there's one right way to do anything. It just really comes down to what are you trying to accomplish. And I think that there are some wrong ways to go about accomplishing specific things. Like, if you want to tell a story like To the Moon, you're probably going to hinder yourself if you try and go real hi-fi. it may just not be tellable there because you fall into the uncanny valley and all this sort of stuff, and everybody's always going to be like, oh, it doesn't feel as good as a movie, or oh, there's not enough choices because it seems like a movie and it plays like a movie, or just all these sorts of things that come up there that don't when it's pixel art. And there's things, there's the upcoming Ender's Game movie, and Ender's Game is my absolute favorite book. I really don't know what to feel about this movie, because even if they do it well, which is a question in itself, the essence of Ender's being inside his head and hearing all his thoughts and what's going on and seeing the way that he reacts to things, and you can't do that when you're looking at the outside of somebody's face. And there's kind of the same sort of thing of just, books don't always translate into movies or vice versa, and hi-fi and lo-fi stuff doesn't always translate back and forth in terms of what you can do in games.
All right, I'm going to hijack things a little bit.
Go for it. Do it.
Totally switch gears here. You've heard of Cliff Bleszinski?
Oh yeah.
Little guy, up and comer, right?
Yeah, he's right in my area. I just saw him on stage actually last week.
Okay, cool. He kind of angered some people on Twitter recently, within like the last few days. He's been talking a lot about the Xbox and kind of supporting their stance when it comes to used games and things. And one of the more controversial things that he said was that it's more on us that game budgets are as high as they are because we expect AAA quality from games. And it was interesting because on Destructoid there was a piece that they came out and kind of countered that and said, well, no. It's up to the games companies to budget things effectively and really look at it, and see where they could cut costs a little bit. So, personally, I feel like I don't have much of an opinion on this because I don't make games. I don't budget things out like that, so I don't want to speak on something I know nothing about. But I'm curious as to where you would fall on this side of the debate.
Well, I think it's very complicated. It's hard to have a universal truth about this. I think there are some good points on both sides. One of the things that when you are pushing hardware to its limits, like a lot of the AAA developers are doing, that's hard. They're having to kind of invent all these shortcuts and all this sort of stuff to work around, ridiculous RAM limitations and all that sort of stuff. I mean, the RAM on the PS3 is just pathetic. I mean, I can't believe that people are able to make AAA games on that amount of RAM. I mean, my games require like 4 to 8 times as much RAM as the PS3 has. How do they do it in that amount of RAM? I don't know. But I mean, they spend an enormous amount of manpower actually making that work because they're having to find all these ways around doing stuff, and they want to do stuff that's hi-fi, but they're constantly having to put stuff in and out of memory in a really effective and a really efficient way that's not causing frame rate dips, and they're having to invent new types of shader type stuff to get the graphics the way they want. So yeah, he's right. I mean, especially coming from the guy whose company does, the Unreal Engine, they have an enormously heavy R&D budget in general for doing engine work. So of course he's going to have that opinion. Somebody else who uses his engine and just goes with the status quo of what his engine can do, not so much. Their R&D costs are going to be a lot lower. But even for myself, when we look at like A Valley Without Wind 1, the reason why it took us so long, 15 months, to do the game originally was because of all the R&D that we had to do, not on a technical standpoint with that one, but from a gameplay standpoint. We were doing something that hadn't been done before. We had a concrete idea of how we wanted it to feel. We had starting ideas for how we thought we wanted to implement it, and then we had to prototype, test, prototype, test, go to beta, test, implement more, stay in beta, test, finally release, and then 3 months of post-release updates. And that sort of thing costs a lot of money. And you can say, oh, you shouldn't have made this or that mistake. Certainly I wish that we hadn't with certain things that cost us more than they should have. but at the same time, mistakes are unavoidable unless you're doing something that's incredibly safe and something that you've done before. So if you're worried about, if you're going to be like super controlling of a budget, you're probably using somebody else's engine, not pushing the graphics, and doing something that is like a safe-ish sort of sequel, that doesn't really break any particularly new ground, because you can conceive of it all at the start of the project, and you're not going to run into any surprises as you go, and you just kind of go, and it's just all implementation time. But there's no creativity there. I mean, why has The Witness taken Jonathan Blow so long? It's because he's basically doing R&D as he makes this stuff up. Why did Monaco take so long to come out? It's because they were innovating, and they did some stuff technically that's really interesting, as well as stuff that is obviously creatively really interesting. And same with Fez or Pick Your Own thing. I mean, those are games that are expensive in terms of time input and so forth, and time is money, especially in really large game companies that need a large staff. And you kind of can't have it both ways. If they're going to have a big staff enough so that they can do the sort of work that they need to do at the peak, then they got to pay those people even when they're not working at peak capacity. So that's expensive. Or they've got to do this periodic layoffs thing, which really sucks for the staff in question, and which we think of as, and I agree, is really unethical. So you wind up either with constantly rushing around, like there's never any downtime ever, and you never have time to just kind of pause and think and maybe plan a little bit. Or you've got these periods where there's, quote, wastage, where you're paying a bunch of staff. And I mean, what is their month, at Epic or whatever, what does their monthly staff roll expenses look like? I mean, is it 7 figures? Probably. I wouldn't be surprised. It's hard to say, but, so you spend an extra month, doing design, there goes $1 million+ bucks, and you want people to be thoughtful, but yet at the same time, it's just, there's a reason why that there's expenditures the way they are. I'm hoping that PS4 and the Xbox One and so forth, because they're not so technically constrained, will really free up developers from not having to use so many tricks. Like just the addition of all that RAM. Oh man, what a difference that's going to make. I mean, because you can just load some stuff into memory and then not have to worry about unloading it and reloading it constantly, You'll have to do some unloading and some reloading, obviously, but not nearly so much as you did on the PS3 or Xbox 360. So, that right there, that's going to save a lot of fiddling for those big developers. But at any rate, it's... There are definitely reasons, if you expect high production values, yeah, the costs are going to be high, but at the same time, there's not one cause. It's a chaotic system. There's a lot of things going on. There are some costs that could be cut, I'm sure.
What do you think of when he says we expect it, though? Because I don't know if I believe that. I mean, maybe there's a certain percentage of people that are expecting gorgeous games and crisp graphics, and all this high-def stuff. But do you think that there's really this sort of, I don't know, this entitlement that people feel like we deserve perfect games? How do you feel about that?
Well, let me put it this way, I guess, first of all, is that I've yet to ever see a game, period, that everybody thought the graphics were good enough for. I remember a while back, Rock Paper Shotgun did a parody article. I don't think it was April 1st. It was just something they did in general, where they were like, "Oh man, the graphics in, I think it was Crysis 3 or something, really suck. Look at this. We zoomed in on a crate, and you see how there's aliasing along the edge of this crate, and you see how, look at this. Crysis 2 has, these crate graphics. They're practically better than in Crysis 3, blah, blah, blah." And they were totally joking, But then the commenters were like, "Yeah, man, look at that. They need to fix their crate graphics in Crysis 3. That's terrible." And then the editors at RPS were like, "Oh Lord," And I mean, obviously, that's not indicative of the market as a whole. But if there's one thing that, say what you will about the graphics of my games, nobody's ever happy with them. And I've heard people talk about, gratuitous space battles as having really bad graphics. And I'm like, look, those are gorgeous. Those are really better than anything I've ever done, and they're gorgeous. How on earth are they complaining about that, But it's just a matter of...
Well, it's like
whatever.
saying sprites are crappy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I love some of the look back on the Super Nintendo. I could never say that the sprite models for Final Fantasy VI are atrocious looking. I don't think that game, if they ever decide to remaster it, would have the same feel, like you had said earlier, if they decide to ditch the graphics in general.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, look at the Final Fantasy remakes they did of, like, Final Fantasy IV for the DS. That really felt different. I played it, and it was like, well, this is kind of the same. Not really.
It's not the same feel. I mean, it has the same story, right? I mean, essentially, it's the same game, right? No matter what you're making, you're going to go with that story. But if you make a deep and sort of dark story, you referenced Final Fantasy VII on the DS, the remake, when you have little bobblehead, like, Japanese characters, it's hard to take Kain and, Cecil, Dark Knights, and Red Wings, all of that really seriously. Like, you're sort of laughing the whole time.
Right, but when it's pixel art, you're kind of imagining them as a lot more menacing than they actually are, which is really cool. So, I mean, in terms of, is there an entitlement complex there with graphics? I would have to say yes, not for the entire audience, but it's very prevalent on the internet. The other thing that I would say is, think of a game that would have been kind of interesting, but you kind of panned it because of the graphics. I mean, just think of a lot of ports to the Wii, the original Wii. You had the version that came out on some other console, and then you had the Wii version. You're like, man, that Wii version's lame. Look at that compared to what the other one was. And I don't know, maybe you didn't do that, but I find myself doing that even. I mean, that's hypocritical of me. Of course it's hypocritical of me. But at the same time, I'm like, I want that to look as good as the other one does, or, I'll just buy the other one. And I guess that's kind of what it comes down to. It's kind of like, if you're buying gas, let's say, got 2 gas stations on a corner, which one do you go buy? You buy the one that's cheaper. And it's kind of like, all right, you got 2 first-person shooters, which one do you buy? You buy the one with the better graphics, probably, unless one of them is just astoundingly better in terms of gameplay. But, usually when it comes to AAA stuff, not always, but there's a correlation between better graphics and better gameplay, and players know this, specifically because the ones with the better graphics come out of the more the developers with more resources. So if they're putting a bunch of resources into the graphics, then usually, but not always, they're also putting a lot of resources into the other aspects of the game. That breaks it down a number of times to everyone's great dismay, but I mean, as a general broad rule of thumb, people get prejudiced against a game that looks bad because they start to think, well, probably the rest of it sucks too. Yeah.
It's true. It's unfortunate, but I think it's true. Cassidy, was there another point you'd like to make about the Cliff Bleszinski thing? Because I actually would like to get Chris's input on really just some general responses to the Xbox One and PlayStation 4.
No, my tangent's good. I'm satiated. I just was curious. It's really interesting, just the whole debate, just because it falls on so many different sides, and I kind of agree with you, I think. Because again, like, I don't make games, I don't budget these things, I don't know, I don't have an insider perspective on that, but I feel like there's a little bit on both sides that could probably be done to solve things out, and I was just curious. Yeah, thanks for honoring me there.
Oh yeah, no, and I think that it's not a one-sided thing. It's not like, oh, players are wrong, but I mean, there just kind of has to be some give and take. And the internet is not really known for that. The internet's... Yeah, I mean,
It's full of level-headed people. What are you talking about?
yeah, I mean, actually, it really kind of is. There's a lot of level-headed people on the internet. They're not the ones that start the pogroms necessarily, or
Yeah, that's true.
so.
They're the
What was
silent
it?
majority. Yeah.
There was a study, I remember reading this a while back, that like 90% of the people who actually surf your website actually don't post. It's like some really low number actually do that are
I
active in
think
the
it was
community.
1 in 400 was the number I'd heard at one point.
Mhm.
But that was years ago, and I think it may have changed. So, I mean, there's this silent majority there, and of course they think various things. Maybe they think graphics are fine the way they are, and they're like, "Are you kidding me, guys? That are complaining about the crate graphics in Crisis 3? Ha ha ha! I'm so much smarter than the commenters." Or maybe they're going, "Yeah," as well, but he's already made my point, so I'm not gonna. And it probably varies, but generally speaking, the people without an axe to grind, one way or another, are least likely to post, especially because they know they're about to get flamed if they really. If they come in with a contrarian viewpoint. The people that might come in with defensive used games on the Xbox, their model of it, defensive not having used games, they're going to get torn a new one on the internet. So why would you engage in that? Because nothing good will come of it, regardless of what you actually think.
Not unless you want to start a debate or just to get people angry, really.
Yeah. But I mean,
It's unfortunate.
right, and the people that are wanting to start a debate are often the ones that go to black and white sort of extremes. So
It's like the Anchorman meme. It says that escalated quickly.
oh, I missed that one.
Yeah.
All right,
No,
well,
Go ahead. Yep.
that's all right. I would like to focus a little bit, Chris, on getting back into a little bit of the E3 mentality. You had said that you did a little bit of research, being the developer that you are, time is really against you at all points. So, Xbox One, PlayStation 3, or PlayStation 4, goodness. There has been a ton of information about these things, how people feel about them. I think it's pretty fair to say that it's universal. People are really bashing this Xbox One, and I really want to get your opinion as a developer who potentially now, with the way that things are going, you could eventually actually bring some of these games to these consoles, which you had said before, kind of unheard of, right? Pretty difficult to develop on something like the PlayStation 3, cell processor, you had to worry about all these different constraints. But this is the first time ever that these companies, Microsoft, Sony, they've been completely open about what's inside the console. Now it's a computer. There's no proprietary hardware. They want developers like yourself to get in there and to bring that stuff to the masses instead of having to rely on Steam, right?
Yeah, for sure. It just depends on how open their process is and what they're charging for dev kits. A lot of the dev kits tend to run between $15,000 and $30,000 for one developer. PlayStation 3 one was about $30,000, I believe, and the Wii ones were about $15,000. I don't know about Xbox 360. So it'll really depend on what are the dev kits going to cost on these other ones. And in our case, we use the Unity 3D platform, and they're already saying, yes, we're going to be supporting the PlayStation 4 and so on. So that's exciting, but I haven't heard anything about pricing yet. And of course, one of the things with indies was always, well, if you want to have a publisher outside of yourself, like Sony, then, they'll pick up the cost of that dev kit for you, and then, yada, yada, yada. And, there were a bunch of things with Microsoft. The certifications were really crazy for the 360 in terms of, multi-month process with like an 80-step checklist, no kidding, and, versus something like Steam, there's no certification. They say, yes, we want your game, and then you put it there. If there's a bug, you can literally, if there's a bug, it takes me 4 minutes to push an update to Steam, and you have it. you and everybody else has that update.
It's amazing.
That is so fast. So fast. And so there's not necessarily the same onus on finding every last bug because you can never do a patch. And you know, if you're making, like I make a lot of games that are procedural in nature, so there's all sorts of weirdo things that can happen as the players monkey around, you know. And without a QA staff of like 200 people, you're unlikely to find everything, even if you run, you know, a 6-month beta or something with hundreds of people or thousands of people. You're still not going to find everything. And, you know, because they're not sitting there playing, you know, 8 hours a day or whatever, all of them, and making very meticulous bug reports. They're just playing when they can, off and on. And so, you know, there's all these sort of roadblocks aside from the technical barriers. I mean, the technical barriers seem gone, but what about the institutional ones? You know, like the famous thing with, I guess it was Fez, wasn't it, with Microsoft? It was like $50,000 or something for the next patch after the first one. It's like, that's crazy. I'd be like, you know, $1 million in debt already to Valve if they did that just for the, you know, for one game, you know, because we put out patches pretty frequently, like something like Terraria, let's say. You know, Terraria'd get an update like every week, and that's how the game would, you know, live and grow, and that was an exciting thing, and people love seeing those updates. Minecraft, you know, there's always, you know, those updates can't come frequently enough for their players. And if you're looking at something like Xbox, if you have to pay every time an update comes out, you know, suddenly that whole avenue of indie games is really cut off, and that interaction, that back and forth between the players and the developer, that can't happen. And I think that one of the strengths of both the phones like Android and iOS and the PC and the Mac is that you can have that back and forth, and that's never ever been the case on any of the consoles. You know, with Sony there for a while, you had to pay for the bandwidth of downloads and stuff, and so it's tricky. With the new generation, it's something that we've talked to Sony a number of times in the past year or so, and they're such nice people. I mean, I really like them a lot, and they seem to be really moving in the right direction. I haven't heard all the details yet in terms of where they're actually going to wind up, but I'm really hopeful because, I mean, I think Valve has said publicly that this enormous percentage of their revenue comes from indie games. And I think it's like 25% or something like that. It's crazy.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's huge.
It is. It's giant.
So, I mean, yeah, Sony and Microsoft, they're not going to ignore that forever. You know, and you know, Apple, I mean, goodness knows how much of their revenue comes from indie games. It's probably like 80% or something. I wouldn't be surprised because, I mean, that's like, you know, 50,000 indie games and, you know, your occasional AAA. So it's, you know, probably 20% of their revenue is just Angry Birds. Who knows? But,
and Farmville 18.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of that stuff on there, but I think what's cool about that is it's more of an open platform, like we're talking about. Even though for every one amazing game, there's 15 piles of junk.
Yeah.
You hardly ever see things like that surface on, say, Steam. You know, that's why the whole Greenlight thing came up, right? But, you know, every once in a while, you'll get a stinker or someone that squeaks by trying to gouge money out of people for a faulty product. But this is something, it's just, what's that?
It depends. Usually with each game, I mean, some people really think that, like, Shattered Haven was a stinker, for instance, and Rock, Paper, Shotgun, you know, they're like, oh, the disappointing Shattered Haven. But I get notes all the time from people that are like, I really enjoyed this game, played it with my wife, etc. And it's like, with each one of these games, you go, this is a stinker. Somebody liked it enough to put it on there, somebody voted it through, some other people actually enjoy playing it, maybe not the majority. Maybe there's some things legitimately wrong with whatever the game is. If it's fundamentally broken, that's a different story. But at the same time, you know, opinions aren't universal, and it's nice with the Valve model because they're just open enough to have some diversity of what some people might consider stinkers but other people don't. Whereas with something like iOS, it's so filled with junk that I think most everybody thinks is junk. Because it's just flat out broken or just not really a game or whatever. That you have to use some sort of third-party news source to find out about stuff that's there, or just look in the most popular lists, and that strikes me as a little bit problematic. So I really like the Valve approach in general, even though that can be really frustrating when you're on the other side of it and your stuff is not getting approved and not getting approved and not getting approved. And I know some other indies with great games that have had that experience, and that is, boy, a kick in the teeth. But I don't know, somewhere in the middle is the answer.
It seems pretty upsetting, especially when you do develop that game, and there are people obviously who are always going to have the opinion, the polar opposite of somewhere else. But isn't that tough to take feedback from? You know that someone is really going to love something out there, right? You had that huge controversy with Valley Without Wind. You were talking about graphics earlier, right? A lot of people used, to use a quote from somebody who had said it, it really seemed like there were placeholder graphics in place for that game. And I remember there was a forum too, does this game look artistically better yet? Something of that nature. So you have threads and people who think one way, and then other people who play the game for almost what it is. As an indie developer, isn't that difficult to get feedback from all that?
Absolutely. I have a great amount of depression on every release period. To the point of taking medication for it. I'm not joking. It's very difficult.
Well, going back to the to the Xbox One and PlayStation 4, does it personally excite you that companies like them they're opening the restrictions to allow maybe yourself to eventually one day bring that stuff to people who really don't ever want to dabble in the PC market, which I find ridiculous. I love the indie games that are on Steam. Sometimes I just don't want to play a AAA title. I don't want to get sunk into something that's going to take me hours and hours on end. And that's when I'll look at the stuff that just came out, maybe take a look and see what's there. That maybe I'm kind of weird here, but I like to look at the stuff that people aren't talking about just to see if I could find that hidden gem.
Sure. I find it somewhat exciting, but it's a good thing for sure, there's no question. But in terms of personally exciting for me, it's hard to say because I don't know what they're going to charge for it. I don't know what sort of royalties they're going to give for it, etc., etc. I don't know how difficult the porting is going to be because, even if the architecture is the same, the OS sure isn't. So it's a matter of, with the Unity 3D platform that we use, they'll handle that aspect for us, but what are they going to charge us for that? If it's $1,000 or $2, that's not a big deal. If it's $15,000 or $30,000, that's a little more concerning, and that's what it's been in the past generation. So that makes it, is this a feasible sort of gamble or not? There's also this case that there's so much money to be made on the PC that we can cover our expenses that way. And I love making games. I don't like porting games. That's not really the same thing as making games. And so if we're able to, do what we do on the PC and be successful and happy and all that, then where's the incentive to just, basically port and kind of make a cash grab? I love playing stuff on the consoles, but do I necessarily need to make something for it? And most of my games heavily rely on the mouse to begin with. So aside from Valley 1 and sort of Valley 1, you really want the aiming with that. Valley 2 and Shattered Haven are really the only two games that Arcen's ever made that would do perfect with just gamepads. Actually, Tidalis would do pretty decently as well. But even with Titalis, you're just faster with a mouse. So I mean, from those sort of standpoints, there's some entrenchment on the PC. There's an audience that's there. It's been demonstrated to be there. There's hardware that's one certain way and operating systems that are a certain way. You have a mouse. If the consoles had a mouse, suddenly that would be like way more exciting to me if like they all had a mouse built in. It'd be like, yes please, that's an obvious thing, bigger audience, and it's like the same sort of control inputs. But I mean, you're kind of having to just doing a port isn't about just like let's get it to run on there, because with Unity it's kind of purchase a license and then compile, and there you are, assuming that you don't have like insane RAM restrictions. That'd be like the only thing. Now that's not a thing, so it's just kind of compile and you're done. But the thing is, you still have all those input problems. It's like, well, if you don't have a mouse, you can't do tooltips. If you don't have a mouse, you can't, drag select. You can't do all these various things. Strategy games on a console are a little bit difficult to do. With Valley 1, free aiming with the mouse was like a big thing. You could fire spells in a 360-degree way, and with Valley 2 we designed it around more of a gamepad sort of a style, and then some of the PC players really freaked out about that, and we had to add in the free aiming, even though it felt like that was to the detriment of the game, but that's another story.
Right. Well, but it's good to listen to what your consumer base wants, and it's pretty obvious that because you had done that before, they almost expected that you would automatically do that the next time that you made a game.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there was a big stink about that, and I got called a lot of names and blah, blah, blah. And so we made the change, and then people had to put in a bunch of parting shots even after that. It's like, all right, we just did what you wanted, and you leave it alone now. But at any rate, it took all of like 2 days to do what they wanted, and they're flipping out. But at any rate, it
really comes down to money then. I mean, everything that you describe, there's a bunch that will obviously get released, but the big thing, it just really seems like for an indie studio, it comes down to that development kit. How much is it really going to cost, and what's the royalties on this thing?
Dev kit, and are you using the mouse? Those would be the two things. Yep.
I'm not sure. Can the PlayStation 3, can you actually put a mouse in? I know it's got some USB ports.
Regardless of whether you can, are people going to? And they're not.
Right.
So, I mean, people are going to have the expectation that if they're going to buy something on the PSN, it's going to be played with a controller. I mean, I have that expectation. And if it's like, oh, this can only be played with keyboard and mouse or something that you have to hook up, I don't think that Sony has a way of preventing you from buying it if you don't have a keyboard and mouse. And so if they're like, ooh, that looks interesting, let me do that. What? Keyboard and mouse? I bought this thing, I can't get a refund? I don't have a keyboard and mouse to plug in, are you kidding me? Then it's like, then you got this huge scandal thing. So
well, they could always write it down, but who reads that stuff, right?
Well, yeah, people, if you don't actively stop them, they won't read that. I mean, so, and if it's buried down in like system requirements or something, which they don't even have on a closed console, it's like I mean, I guess they say like you have to have the PlayStation Eye to play this thing, but
it's risky.
Yeah, it's really risky. So, I would say, you pretty much want stuff to work on a gamepad, and there's a question of if something has been developed natively for the PC, does it feel right if you port it to something that's with a gamepad, or does it feel like the clunky younger brother? And if you're going to a lot of trouble for something that's the clunky younger brother and spending a bunch of money and so forth, and then it bombs and your studio looks bad because you made this clunky younger brother sort of a game, then it's kind of like, boy, that was a lot of trouble for some bad press and a bunch of wasted money. So it's kind of it's tricky, so I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic, but in terms of, for something like, Braid or, some of these other ones, if it's a first-person shooter or platformer or whatever, then, that's an obvious yes. They're going to be there as soon as they possibly can, and this just makes everything better. But there's a lot of other games that don't necessarily that require different kinds of input.
Yeah, I think it's really nice that I know a few people, is what I guess I'm trying to say. They tell me they would love a PC, but the main reason they're into consoles is because they don't want to worry about anything that happens to a computer. They don't really know how to fix anything. They've never put one together themselves, and they don't want to go in there and tweak the resolutions and the ambient occlusion and all of those little statistics that I actually love. I think that being able to customize a game to however it is that you want to play makes it just that much better. But a lot of people really don't want that, which is why they go the route of the console.
Yeah, you're describing me right now. I play PC. I've got a good PC that'll run those games, but as soon as this I don't even know, these drivers and this graphics card and all that stuff, as soon as they get passed up, I don't know what I'm gonna do, because I don't know how to upgrade this stuff or alter it and tweak it. That's what's nice about a good console, but I mean, it's good to have options though, like for people that are really into, kind of like you said, like changing things up and getting the optimum performance out of it. Like, it's awesome that exists. It's also awesome that I can buy a game, bring it home, put it on my Xbox, and it runs within 5 minutes and you're loading it, and I don't have to do anything except sit down and play it.
The question is, what sort of a niche as a developer are you targeting? Because with a lot of the PC gamers, they feel very underserved in general. The AAA boys are kind of ignoring them in a lot of respects. They're getting kind of, in a lot of cases, shoddy ports of stuff from consoles, and it doesn't have the it's not optimized for PC, and they're like, it's locked into some resolution that I don't like, and it doesn't have ways for me to take advantage of my awesome hardware, or whatever. And so they're kind of frustrated at those sort of things. Or there's the people in smaller markets like strategy games, and they're like, why is nobody making strategy games that aren't just kind of rehashes with better graphics of stuff we saw 10, 15 years ago? And so, these are kind of opportunities, I guess, for a developer like Arcen, where we're meeting the needs of that underserved market. And does the console market have a hunger for the sort of things that we provide? I don't know. I think that it's unquestionably a good thing. I think it's great what Sony is doing in particular, and probably what Microsoft's doing in terms of going more open with indies. Whether or not Microsoft's actually going more open with indies is a question I don't really know. But Sony definitely is. And I think that's a great thing. It's going to benefit a ton of indies really well. Will it benefit me? I don't know. It remains to be seen. But it'll definitely be good for a lot of people.
It'd be awesome, wouldn't it? So,
yeah.
Getting into a little bit of controversy then, I would also like your opinion on this. Not just because it's a hot button topic, but Microsoft has gone on record saying that indie studios will not be able to self-publish on Xbox Live Arcade. You would actually have to go through either them or a third party.
Bye, Microsoft.
Is it really that big of a deal?
Yeah, see ya.
That easy, huh? All right, next topic. No.
Bam, one and done.
They'll reverse that eventually, but yeah, I mean, they have a very Byzantine process. It's not worth the time. There's wasn't it Retro City Rampage that got really burned with their stuff? Wasn't that Microsoft, or was that Sony? Something I'm mixing it up.
Was that Retro City Rampage? I know exactly what you're talking about. I think it might have been.
Retro. It was definitely him. I remember talking to him about it.
It released on PlayStation platforms. I don't know if it released on Xbox.
That's why. Yeah, it was really big problem with Microsoft with them. So with him, really, it's one guy mainly. But yes, I mean, that does not sound indie friendly to me. So
it's unfortunate. You've got an open platform now, and you get people excited for it, and you want people to come in, but...
Well, open platform doesn't just mean that it's the same hardware is something else. That, I mean, you know, there's more to that. I mean, Steam is only somewhat an open platform. It's kind of a semi-open platform. You know, there's a gate, and once you get let in that gate, then it's open for you after that. But there's a definitive gate, and Microsoft has this like fortress in the way, not just a gate. And then once you get into the fortress, you stay in the fortress. You're not like on the other side of the gate and things are happy. You're still in the fortress.
It's the village.
Yeah.
I cannot believe I just referenced that.
That is funny, but yeah. But yeah, and, you know, in PlayStation, I think probably is going to take kind of either the Valve route or the Apple route, and either one of those would be, in general, fine. I have a hard time believing they would fully take the Apple route. You know, Nintendo openly flaunted disregard for indies like a year or something ago with like, you know, you must have an office, blah, 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 and some other comments they'd made. I think, what was it, last E3 or something? I guess Reggie Fils-Aimé was like, you know, we don't have all these little games. He was touting something in the 3DS and was basically taking a shot at indie developers while he did it. And they seemed to have kind of reversed their stance, at least somewhat. And so, I don't know.
I hope so.
Yeah, but their, you know, DSi, whatever it is, DSiWare, I guess it is, and WiiWare, they seem to be going in a way that's a little more positive. But I think that Sony's probably head of the game on this. So it's, you know, things are moving in the right direction. But you know, whenever somebody approaches you with an offer, even if it's somebody big, and you're like, you don't say yes, you say, all right, okay, cool, show me the contract and then we'll see. And there's probably some contract points you got to talk about there. And so it's like when it's broad announcements like this and not a whole lot of details, it's like, yeah, let's get down to details before we are like, yay, woohoo, this is the best thing, you know.
So I'm gonna switch gears again. I'm the gear shifter here.
The segwayer.
not very smooth at it. I gotta work on it. Did you catch anything from Nintendo at all? Did you see any of the news or anything that came from them?
Yeah, I think I caught all the big things, yeah.
So there is, I feel like there's a divide with people right now with Nintendo, where you get people who, you know, love Nintendo, will stand by Nintendo and defend them to the day they die, right? And then there are other people, which I think I kind of fall more closely with, who love Nintendo but are starting to grow a little bit fatigued, I guess, with some of the stuff that they're doing. And I got the sense from, you know, just reading things and kind of looking at consensus that their conference was a little underwhelming this year. I should say their presentation that they gave, rather. So how do you feel about the Nintendo debate? Do you think that they need to start shifting away and looking at other things, or do you feel like they're doing what they need to be doing right now?
Whew, that's a complicated question. Some of both, honestly. Nintendo's funny. They have kind of a built-in audience to a certain extent, but at the same time, they don't. Because there are, you know, they have a built-in audience of a certain size, and then they have a really skeptical audience of another size. Then they have this whole casual group, which has like no brand loyalty, and the Wii was like something that interested them for a while, and then now is, you know, maybe still hooked up to their TV, maybe it's in the closet and they pull it out at parties, maybe. And, you know, the Wii U's not obviously leaping off the shelves. I'm glad to see that it seems to be doing a little bit better. But now, given its price versus the price of the stuff that's coming from Microsoft and Sony, you know, I would bet that there's going to be a price drop for the Wii U coming this year.
It seems like it has to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it really seems like it has to happen. I'll be surprised if it doesn't go down to like $250. I mean, maybe they'll go only to $300, but I mean, it seems like they ought to be going to 250, because now they're hitting the point where they've got enough first-party software that's actually interesting that they can probably push that thing at 250 and make it up in software sales. Whether or not they want to try that is another question, because once you drop a console's price that far, there's no going back. But so they have the data that we don't have, so they know much better what they should do. But the fatigue that you talk about, I was really feeling that around the GameCube time, and it was years before I got a GameCube. I really kind of ignored that console, and then came back when it was kind of on its last legs and going out. I came back and picked up some of the games on that. I was like, hey, this is pretty cool, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Mario Kart and Zelda and
Resident Evil 4, right?
Yeah. Although I didn't play that on the GameCube. I played that on the Wii. That was a really cool version of it, I thought. But the Wii version was already in the works by the time I was hearing much about it on the GameCube. So it's like, well, I'll wait for the Wii version, and that was really cool. But yeah, so I mean, I was feeling that fatigue then, and I think different people feel the fatigue at different times. Wii was obviously a real high point for them, but I guess for me, I don't really have any expectations for Nintendo. Like, I'm not looking to buy a bunch of third-party games on there. I'm looking for the console to be cheap enough that it makes sense to buy it so that I can get access to the first-party games that I want, and that'll be about that. And I want backwards compatibility so that I don't have to have a Wii and a Wii U hooked up to my TV at the same time if I want to, or off and on, whichever, so that I can play my older, like, Mario Galaxy or whatever. So, I mean, in that sense, they're kind of delivering. For me, the price isn't quite where I want yet, and I'm not in a real hurry because they haven't put out stuff that was personally compelling to me enough to go ahead and pull the trigger. But I think by the end of this year or middle of next, I'll have a Wii U and solid library of a few games, and that's that. And if that's what they're cool catering to, if they make money off of that with the people that are of my general generation in terms of how they feel about Nintendo and all that, then that's cool. I don't think that they're going in the right way with the casual market. I think that's slipped away from them. So I think that if they're banking on lots of casual folks, they're in trouble on that front. And then in terms of third-party support, I mean, forget about it. With just the hardware specs are not going to be there. So compared to the competition, and with Sony coming in at $400, I mean, that's some stiff competition right there. So
$400 for the beginning of a console, that's unprecedented right now. It seems amazing. I don't know, did you get to see the end of the press conference? I know it's been floating around, but it's the media that's there, not just standard consumers, and they were so excited. You normally don't get that kind of energy at E3.
Yeah, it's it depends. Obviously, I mean, I've seen some you get some excited spots, but yeah, there's a lot of jadedness going on there. I think that that actually plays into one of the reasons, that's one of the reasons I don't like watching all the E3 coverage, is they're trying to like decide who won and who lost E3, and it's like, really? Does that?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I hate that.
Yeah, and it's like, if Nintendo's presentation was underwhelming, what the heck do I care? They spent less money on the conference and didn't do a good job do as good a job at PR. Woohoo, I really care about Nintendo's PR. I really care how good that is. It's like, no, I want to know, what does their console cost? Is it worth for me to get it based on, the games that I want that are exclusive to that console, and what else the console might do other than games, which is basically nothing. And so, it's those are kind of the questions that are relevant to me as a consumer. And from that standpoint, I thought Nintendo showed like 6 things that I was interested in, and Sony showed a lot of interesting things, and they showed a price that told me that Nintendo's probably going to have to drop their price. So between those things, I felt like Nintendo had a good showing. but you know, that's just me.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's just because, like I said, I mean, I grew up playing Nintendo, and Andrew and I were talking about this beforehand a little bit too. Like, I just, coming from a company who is responsible pretty much for laying, you know, largely a lot of the groundwork that this entire industry is built on today, we just haven't seen anything brand new. You know, anything just like this brand new from out of left field innovative idea since like Pikmin, you know? And it's, I guess I just feel like I would love to see them do something because they are so talented and because they are, you know, kind of a beacon, really, especially in history if you look at it. And I feel like
It's true.
they're playing it, yeah, and they're playing it so safe. And maybe that's a cultural thing. Maybe, you know, in their mind, like that's how they do business. I don't know, but I guess that's why for me, I did feel very underwhelmed by it because for me it was just another Smash Brothers, another Mario Kart. You know, hey, here's a Zelda you played almost 10 years ago. You know, you got all this stuff, and it's just like, you know, I guess that's where it was disappointing for me, and maybe it's unfair for me to hold them to that. And I don't mean to like criticize them on that, but that's just sort of where it was, where it fell down, in my opinion.
I think that one of the things that Nintendo is subtly very good at, and that a lot of people don't give them credit for, is that they have big, bold new ideas, but they wrap them in with familiar characters. And so, you know, Mario Galaxy, you know, that was really different in terms of the way they handled like the planetoids and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, with some of the Zelda stuff, I mean, they had you know, the one-to-one sword fighting with Skyward Sword. That was pretty cool. You know, there were some games that tried to do that. I forget the name of that one that came out early on the Wii that was really bad, and it's actually good that I forgot the name so I can say that. But you know, and so they're doing some interesting things from a technical standpoint. And, you know, as casual as Wii Sports is, or Wii Sports Resort really is a better example since it has the extra, whatever you call it, little motion attachment that makes it more precise. Motion Plus. That's fairly innovative in terms of games, just as a way to control. And I feel like with the Wii U, what they're doing is super exciting in terms of having a second screen that is hidden from the players on the main screen. I mean, you can have a dungeon master who's like messing with the main I mean, as a game developer, that is like the most exciting thing ever. That is so cool. I mean, there's so many things I could do with that. And you know, if I knew there was an audience and I could actually develop for the Wii U specifically and not have that be just like a money sink that's like, oh man, I just shot my company sort of thing, then that would be like such an attractive thing for me to do, because it's so that whole act of having one thing that's hidden from the other players but still being in the same room, that is so powerful. There's so many cool things. And I don't know that they're really exploiting that fully yet. There's certainly some third-party ones that are kind of playing with it a bit, and they've done some kind of, you know, I thought that the new Super Mario Brothers Wii U, whatever it's called, I thought that was a little bit weak sauce with the way that they, like, here, you can kind of cheat with the second thing. Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I didn't really care for it either.
Yeah, I mean, the game looks cool and I'll pick it up, but I won't be using the pad for cheating. That doesn't, you know, that seems to kind of defeat the purpose of that. But I mean, so I mean, I understand what you're saying in terms of they're not really pushing into new IP at all, and in some respects, you know, but I mean, they are pushing the boundaries of what a platformer is, and they're pushing a lot of hardware boundaries, and they're kind of hoping, I think, that more will be done with their hardware than actually is. And there's only so much staff that they have, or that are, you know, first-party studios under them, and so they're really limited in terms of how many different ideas software-wise they can pursue. So if nobody else jumps on the Wiimote and says, we're going to do this awesome, really well thought out thing that you can only do with the Wiimote or with the Wii U pad thing, then that is just kind of a hardware dead end. And I think they really do think of themselves as a hardware company almost as much as, if not slightly more than, a software company. And so they do so much of their innovation on the hardware side. So I mean, on the one hand, I agree with you, and I don't. You know, I'd like to see more new stuff from them. They're so creative, yada yada. At the same time, I think they're being creative in their own way, and a lot of it just kind of gets lost in the, oh, this is Mario again sort of view, or oh, this is Zelda again view. But there's always something new in each one of those. And
Sure.
you know, even Mario Kart, they've been doing more interesting things with the evolution of that than, say, a lot of racing games that you would see on like the PS3 or the Xbox. You know, you get better and better graphics on those. You get new cities to race in or whatever. Occasionally you get one that's like old racing, and that's kind of interesting. But you know, there's not that much innovation there. It's just different IP. So you know, up and up and up graphics. So it seems like more innovation maybe than is really there. And you know, versus Nintendo, it's easy to seem like less innovation. It's like, oh, it's Mario Kart again. It's like, well, yeah, but now you've got a hang glider, and you've got like this thing that lets you go on walls, and you know, it's, I don't know, it's a little of both.
It's a really interesting point, you know, and that's something you've honestly helped me see something I didn't actually consider. Because, you know, you look at it, things like the Kinect and the Move would not exist if it hadn't been for the Wii. You know, not in the sense that they were, because it was such a runaway success for them. I guess it's me, like, just going back to, you know, when I was little and turning on games that just blew my mind. You know, I remember playing Star Fox for the first time at my friend's house, and I thought it was so awesome.
Yeah.
You know, or playing like Super Metroid and just getting blown away by it, just being creeped out by the atmosphere and stuff.
Right.
Don't even bring up Star Fox.
That was so awesome. You don't like it?
I love Star Fox, but that's my point. You know, with all of this, I do agree with you, Chris, that it's awesome to see Nintendo continuously push out things that everybody loves. It is. But you have different variations of Mario. Now, I don't know if you played 3D Land, but that's been like the best Mario.
So awesome.
It really is. It's one of my favorites, I think, of all time. But then you come out with like New Super Mario Brothers 2, and it's just
that was
like,
good too.
It's like,
oh my god, the level design was so good.
It's alright.
They had really good level design. That is such an underrated game. They had really, really tight level design, and they had a bunch of new mechanics for doing new kinds of platforming. I guess maybe it's the only sort of thing that a level designer would notice, but I was really impressed. They didn't do anything new mechanically, but from a level design standpoint, that was one of their better games of late.
Like they use the same music and collect coins, and you get like 68,000 coins on the title screen. And
all right, yeah, the coins thing was super lame.
Yeah,
and they could have done more with the music. I'll grant you those.
Right. I mean, listen, Nintendo is always good with their level design, and you're right. I can't fault them for something like that because they're experts at it. It's a professional studio, a professional company rather. They know what they're doing with that. But going back to, you know, Star Fox, Metroid, some of these franchises that we've grown up with, as you both were talking about, where are they? You know, where is all this? I understand that developers grow, and maybe eventually you guys, you know, over at Arcen will grow out of the studio. Maybe you'll get bought by somebody. I don't know. We can't tell what the future is, and I know people like to stay indie, but just imagine yourself coming up with something like that, playing it, you know, even when you're little, but now it's nowhere to be seen, and they continuously pump out these things. So there's Mario Tennis, Mario Sonic at the Olympics, Super Mario Brothers, New Super Mario Brothers, Mario 3D Land, you know, all these things. And I know I'm being a little crass in how I'm portraying Nintendo here, but it just gets me a little fired up when we have the Metroid to remember is Other M, which is the Metroid to forget.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I guess that's for me too. Is it's like, you know, I love those games, and I still love those games. You know, Super Metroid is awesome, and I'm actually really partial to the Metroid games on the Game Boy Advance too. But I guess for me, it's like, you know, we get like this high turnover of new IPs that are introduced all the time. So it's like, you always have something new to digest and kind of jump into. And then with Nintendo, I guess, because all the games are very different and they're all very well made. It's hard to argue that because their games have a high level of polish. They're very well designed, very well conceived, and it's just, for me, I guess, it's that thing where there's nothing just like this brand new from out of left field thing that I have no familiarity with that's coming to hit me with it, and that's probably where I'm getting a little bit disappointed. But again, maybe it's not fair for me to hold them to that, because they're a different kind of company than Sony and Microsoft and all these other, developers that work for those people,
It kind of, it is a very good point on that, because it makes me wonder if there isn't something kind of institutional that's pushing them away from that. I mean, earlier in this, I was commenting on how R&D is expensive, and it's also kind of inherently messy. And if there's one thing that Nintendo games are, is they're clean. The new Zelda is going to be like super tight, and it's going to be really, everything is like thought through, and the world makes a lot of sense and whatnot, in the weirdo way of, mushrooms make you bigger sort of sense. But I mean, it's going to be internally consistent in various sort of ways, and it's going to make sense in the sense of the logical flow of, your growth, your character's growth in terms of, what weapons you get when, and, how all that feels. It's going to feel satisfying, in general. And if you are developing something really, really new, you've got the characters in the world and the story and all that sort of stuff to think up. Then you've got, like, how does this thing even play? And, there's so much ground that's been trodden now that it's, in 1995, you could make a game that was 3D with a spaceship and you shoot stuff, and that seemed new. But, I mean, there's not really something that's, like, low-hanging fruit now that you can do. There was really a potentially a shift there somewhere where they started going into just really refinements of things they already did, and then adding incremental cool new things. So this is Mario, it's platforming, you know how the controls work in general, but now look at this, he sticks to the normals of these spherical objects, or oh, look at our water physics and stuff in Super Mario Sunshine. And as much as everybody likes to hate on Mario Sunshine, and it wasn't my favorite at the time either. It really,
I love Mario Sunshine.
Yeah. In retrospect, I really like it a lot, and I actually want to go back and play it again. But at the time, I was like, oh my God, what have they done to Mario? Because it was just like so out of left field in terms of how they changed the tone. I was just like, this is not Mario. What on earth? And I think that reaction was actually kind of out there some in general, and they may have been reacting to that some, if I might be different but not too different. But we want to come up with new things, but Pikmin was different, and it only has such a that was legitimately different, but it has such a niche appeal because it's so different that people don't know what it is. And should we really be doing that? Because can we make something that's both different and really polished and profitable? I don't know, maybe not. And so, and they're not ones to just copy other developers, so they're not necessarily going to let somebody else break the ground and then just make a more polished version of that. That's not their style. So, yeah, that doesn't really leave them a whole lot of room. Not to say that they're making necessarily, that they should do, no brand new stuff. I'm just saying that may be why they're not.
Maybe. I don't know. It gets me all fired up with that. It's because I love my 2D stuff. My games where exploration is key. That's actually what I really liked about the original Valley Without Wind. There was a reason to continue to explore and to harvest materials in all these different ways. It made you just keep going, I guess, as opposed to, you still have the exploration element in Valley Without Wind 2, but it's much different. If you understand,
it's more
of
a strategy game than a it's a different genre in a lot of ways. So,
definitely.
Yeah, so I mean, I understand that, and Actually, they did make a Star Fox game not all that long ago. It was for DS, I think it was, though, and I don't think it did.
That was a remake, though, or it was like a re-release, wasn't it? Just like the classic one.
I don't think so. Pretty sure it was. I'm pretty sure that was a new thing, and they had some stuff where you could draw on the bottom screen or something and direct something. I don't really remember.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a while. It's probably actually been closer to 10 years, but at least it's not been so far, because is it 15 years or whatever. They're trying to revive Kid Icarus and do him in a new way and stuff. I mean, I don't know. They're finally doing Donkey Kong games again, although they wrecked the roll with it, and it's still really fun. But
yeah, thank you for actually saying that, because the original Donkey Kong Country games are some of my favorite of all time.
Ditto.
Yeah, Donkey Kong Country 2 being the best, but really appreciate the first one, and the third one's still fun.
Yeah,
but
it's several steps down, but it was
right. I agree, because David Wise didn't do the music, obviously.
Yeah, that too, and the graphics were a little bit just different, and the new character, what's his face,
Kiddy Kong
was not my favorite.
You don't like fat toddlers? I get it.
No, pretty much not.
Yeah, I miss that stuff, because I was one of those haters. I was when Donkey Kong Country Returns got announced. I originally got super excited. I remember standing up at my computer going, "What? Yes!" And then watching it going, "Where's the Kremlings? What? Wait, what's going on? Oh no! Oh no!" And then my joy turned to rage, and I didn't give it a chance. And I played it, and you know what? It was all right. But
it's actually really fun. The main thing that bugs me is they changed one small thing where when you roll through an enemy, it doesn't accelerate you quite as much as before.
That's right!
So you think you play Donkey Kong 1, you think as soon as you roll through this guy, you're going to hit that guy and then this other guy that's just the right distance away.
Nope.
And instead, you stop right in front of that third guy and take a damage. And that was super frustrating. It's like, why'd they change that? But that was really my only complaint. I mean, I thought the Tiki things were not so interesting as the Kremlings, but it was kind of like, well, whatever. I mean, the Kremlings were cool, but I'm not emotionally attached to them or something. So the my wife and I played Donkey Kong Country Returns together, which is, I think, one of the things that really swayed it in my favor was we could both play at the same time, and that's just so awesome. And they did that with, obviously, New Super Mario Bros. Wii as well, and that's something that's pretty innovative, too, making that actually work. Obviously, I wrote up a thing a while back saying if they had just made the characters not collide with one another, New Super Mario Bros. Wii would have been so much better, because you wouldn't be knocking each other down holes and stuff. And I think that they did that. I don't remember if they did that in Donkey Kong Country Returns. Maybe they didn't, but
I don't think they did.
No,
honestly, I never played it that way.
Yeah, I did that in Valley 1 and 2. I was like, characters should not collide. If their characters are colliding, this is super frustrating. But
well, I'm glad to see that we share the same feelings on certain mechanics. You have to keep it the same way. It's almost like if they make a new Mega Man game, which they did with 9 and 10. You have to keep some things the same. You have to. The jump needs to feel the same. 3 shots on screen all at once. That's all you can do. Because as well as I do, they could have enhanced that, brought it up.
Yeah.
But you have to keep some things classic, even if it does get an overhaul like Donkey Kong Returns did, which you should try it on the 3DS. I like it better for the fact that you don't have to waggle, ever.
Yeah, that's true. That was one other minorly annoying thing, although I think they were just shorter buttons, but yeah.
Alright, well, Chris, I think that you have touched down on way more than I envisioned, and I really appreciate that. Cassidy, is there anything else you'd like to ask this gentleman?
No, I'm all good. He's put everything to rest pretty sufficiently, I think.
It's just interesting to us, and I think to other people who are listening, especially later on too. Indie developers, they care about what the mainstream does, but at the same time, you have to play games as well. You maintain a different lifestyle, and you have different concerns than maybe what they announce at these major conferences. But you still can enjoy them. It still affects you in a different way. And I know I'm going to be looking out for that now once I look through these press releases here, and we probably will have some information. I want to know how much those dev kits are going to be running and costs, things like that. Hey, maybe you should look into it.
Yeah, I mean, they just haven't announced it yet. So, when they announce it, then it'll be going all through the indie scene with everybody knowing all of a sudden. But unless they've said stuff to people under NDA, in which case, couldn't tell you if I knew, which I don't. But yes, I mean, it's exciting. And I'm excited to see the fruits of what this E3 is talking about, but I don't know which fruits are going to be the fruit and which fruits are going to be, rotten. I didn't say that right, but you know what I mean.
I do. I understand. All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up this show right here. Chris, thank you so much for stopping by, and everybody. This is a brand new roundtable event. I think we're probably going to end up using this a lot more. It's a lot of fun just to get opinions from everybody, including developers like Chris throughout the industry. So thank you for staying around, checking it out with all of us. E3's been really exciting this year. So if you'd like to see more from it, we've got tons of coverage on Leviathyn.com. That's Leviathyn with a Y. If you're watching on Twitch, you can just click on the homepage button underneath the wonderful trailers that you've been watching this entire time. So give us a subscribe, and shoot. Chris, you've got some stuff going on, I'm sure. Why don't you take this time, just a little plug for yourself and your company.
Oh, okay. Well, we just put out Skyward Collapse, which is a pretty weird game. It's really fun, though.
You don't hear that too often. Developers just going, listen, we made this game, and it's freaking weird.
I'll say that about almost every game we've ever made, but but yeah, if it's not weird, it's no good. No, just kidding. But it's kind of a god game, which you haven't been too many of those in a while, and but you're not vying for either side. It's also kind of a strategy game, and you've got these murderous little dudes that are trying to kill each other, and you're trying to kind of help them along with that, but at the same time not let either side win. And so one reviewer put it as her summation of it is, it's like playing chess against yourself, although you're always a huge a-hole. And I thought that was about the best description of it. My way of putting it is generally the game encourages you to have kind of this bring me the whip and switch boy sort of feel to it, where in order to win, you kind of have to do bad stuff to yourself. And it's like, all right, I did this thing. Here's a Minotaur. He's going to go, solve my problem. It's like, oh, Minotaur, stop. Ah! And it's like, all right, well, time to bring out, something else on the other side to fight him. And then it's like, oh, man, so it's kind of that problem with you've got a bunch of rabbits, now introduce foxes, now you get a bunch of foxes, now so there was an old lady who swallowed a fly,
right.
So that's the one we just came out with. That's been doing really well, and we're actually working on our first expansion for that already, and then we're working on another game called Bionic Dues, which is going to be coming out later in the year, and is more of a tactics sort of game. And we're using kind of a new approach recently where we're developing out smaller experiences that are still sizable, but instead of going for 100 plus hours, we're going for a few dozen hours. And if you get more, then that's great. But and we're doing shorter development times, and then also a lower cost to the players. So we're putting these out at $5 instead of 15 or 20, and that lets us kind of test and see what people like, and lets people test and see if they like it, which of course we have a demo anyway. And then with the things that turn out to be really popular, like Skyward, then we'll do a bunch more free content, as well as some optional paid expansions for like $3 each. And the cool thing about that is, in order for us to have the same cost to the consumer as like the original AI War did, we'll have to make 5 expansion packs plus the base game for Skyward. And it's just like, that's just win all the way around, because you can get so much more stuff for not that much money. And if you just want the kind of base experience, you can get that for super low price. So that's a new, it's kind of our new way of thinking about how we're doing games, and that way we're not investing like $300,000 plus into developing something like Valley Without Wind and then finding out, in 15 months sort of thing, and then finding out later, do people like this, how do they feel about it, and so on. Instead, we can kind of, develop along with the players, basically. It's a little different from an alpha funding model, because it's not alpha, but it's just kind of, it's almost like it's episodic in some ways, like Walking Dead or something, except bigger than that in terms of how much content there is. So
Excellent. And it's available on Steam right now, correct?
Yep.
At how much?
It's $5.
$5. It's not bad at all. It's funny because, as I was saying earlier, I wasn't even aware of this game coming out, and then I remember browsing your page, your blog, and you were talking about it. I was like, Skyward, was that like a new expansion or something? Like, what's going on? And then I checked the Steam page. Oh, shoot! It's a new game. All right. I gotta ask him about this.
Yeah, we're already up to 3 games so far that have come out this year, and a expansion which is gonna launch on Monday. Then we'll have probably 3 more expansions and 1 more game that come out in the remainder of this year. So I mean, it's a busy year for us. We're like doubling our catalog practically.
Yeah,
So.
I think you need to calm down a little bit.
But it works out well. This is a case of allocating expenses well, because we've already done all of our engine development now. Part of the reason why Valley 1 was so expensive was because probably at least 40% of our effort there was in engine development. So then Valley 2 was comparably cheaper, but there was still like a metric ton of art. And so that was a big cost. And so we're doing things that have more condensed amounts of art, but better art at this point. And so that keeps the art costs down while at the same time keeping them looking better. And then, by doing that plus having smaller, more focused design that doesn't have to work on a bunch of engine development, that really keeps it so that we can do like some crazy cool stuff, crazy cool fast. So
it really is exciting. And Chris, thank you so much for lending us your time, your experience, and your information to all these questions. It's always so interesting. You missed it yesterday. We had Tim Keenan, Jordan Brock, and Chris Taylor on here, and everyone was just giving us a little insight in what they thought about this. But man, thank you. Really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. So you heard it. Go ahead and try out some Skyward Collapse on Steam right now, $5. The guys at Arcen are always good. And thank you guys again for joining us. Don't worry, we'll have some more content for you, and you can finish up E3 over on Leviathyn.com. Everybody, go ahead